Hello, welcome back. Today I'm doing a watercolor paper test comparing two types of papers from St. Cuthberts Mill, which are Bockingford and Saunders Waterford. I want to see how paint reacts on each of them, so let's get started. First, let's get to know these two papers. The first one is Bockingford. I got it for free from about a year ago. It's a smaller size, 5 by 7 inches, and it's 300 GSM cold pressed paper. I really like how portable it is, super easy to carry around. It comes with 12 sheets and you can paint on the both sides. So basically you can paint it in a total of 24 pages. The texture is quite noticeable. You can actually feel it when you touch the paper. That's great if you like working with the texture in your paintings, but this one is a cellulose paper, not 100% cotton. So I was really curious to see how it compares to cotton paper. Now, the second one is Saunders Waterford. This is one of my favorite so far. I didn't buy it as a sketchbook or block form or anything, but I bought it as a big roll and I have to cut it in the smallest sheets myself. This one is 100% cotton, also cold pressed, 300 GSM as well. The textures feel so soft right away when you touch it. One big advantage is that buying it as a big roll like this is more economical and you can cut it into any size you like. I also enjoy making my own DIY sketchbooks, so it works really well for that. But there's some downsides too. The roll is quite big and cutting it can be a little bit tricky. You have to find a decent space for doing so and also need to be very careful because the paper is white and it's easy to accidentally get it dirty. Alright, let's start the first part of the test. I'm using primary colors yellow, red, and blue for my Hobby professional watercolor set. The good things from these three colors is that they are primary colors, so we can see right away that the secondary colors can be shown off by mixing them right away on the paper. And also these three have some different characteristics regarding the standing color, so we will clearly see the results from the lifting test. In this stage, I will test the technique like swatching dry on dry, wet on wet, blending, mixing color on the paper, salt effect, using marking fluid, and the lifting techniques. My Saunders Waterford is on the left hand side and the Bockingford is on the right hand side. So firstly, I applied masking fluid on the right top corner on both paper and let it dry. Then I started with the color. On the cotton paper, I can feel how smooth it is. The paint goes nicely, blends easily, and the color looks bright. When I add the water and drop color as wet on wet staining, it flows very beautifully. Now when I do it the same on the Bockingford paper, the color is also bright, of course, but it feels like it stays more on top of the surface rather than soaking inside the paper. The blending is not as smooth. As you can see, more separation and the texture on the cellulose paper more. Actually, it's not a bad thing or anything. It's quite interesting if the kind of this effect is what you are looking for. So next, I mix the color directly on the paper. On the cotton paper, everything blends effortlessly. The color just flow into each other. The paper really helps with that. I barely need to do anything about it, but on the cellulose, in comparison, is a little bit difficult. You can see more hard edges on the color, but actually the color do mix with each other, of course, but not as easy as cotton paper, unless I help them a bit with my brush. Then I add some salt and let everything dry. Now for the lifting taste. As I mentioned earlier, these three colors have different staining characteristics. Yellow is non-staining, red is staining, and blue is semi-staining. I try to control the lifting brush stroke here equally, repeating just only 15 times for each color to see how well they can be lifted. When I try lifting the paint, both paper performed quite good, but the difference was noticeable. In general, on cotton paper, it's actually harder to lift because the pigment sinks deeper into the fiber, but cellulose paper, the paint tends to sit more on the surface, making it easier to lift off. So as you can see here, in the blue color, as a semi-staining color, it can be lifted almost completely on Bockingford paper, while on the cotton one, some pigment stay remains. The red, being the stain color, is harder to remove on both. Okay, once paper dried, let's take a closer look on these two paper. I would say that both paper work just fine with our techniques, but Saunders Waterford as a cotton paper gives a softer, more natural, delicate, and beautiful flow. The cellulose paper, Bockingford one, still working fine, but you have to control it more to avoid hard edges. For blending, cotton clearly wins for me. It blends smoothly with very little effort. On the cellulose paper, you really need to help them with the brush. For marking fluid, both paper handle it just fine. No tearing when removing it, but I noticed that it was a little bit easier to remove the marking fluid from cotton paper. However, there are some color stain from my masking fluid left on just only cotton paper, but not on the cellulose one. As for the salt effect, both paper perform well, but the effect appears slightly clearer and more beautiful on Saunders Waterford. I think this also depends on the characteristic of each pigment as well as how wet the paper is at the time that the salt is applied. It may be because of my cellulose paper dry faster, and by the time I add the salt, it did not show the effect as strongly compared to the cotton one, which is able to retain moisture for longer time. So, but in general, overall, I think salt worked just fine on both paper. And lastly, at first, I just wanted to test professional watercolors on these two paper. However, out of my personal curiosity, I wondered how a non-professional paint would perform compared to this Hobie paint I used. So as a bonus, I add another mixing and blending test under Hobie test one. This one is Schminker Academy, which is a student line. And interestingly, both paper still perform well, but once again, cotton paper produce smoother blend while the cellulose paper show more hard edges. Now, moving on to the real painting test. This is the fun part. I believe that simply applying paint on the paper is one thing, but it's more meaningful to see how the paper performs in the actual painting. So I decided to paint two different landscapes here. One featuring a cliff with a seascape and the other one a mountain with water. Although they are not that identical scenes, both compositions include elements like sky, water, rocky forms, which allowed me to use and compare a wide range of the techniques on these two paper. Of course, I used the same Hobie professional paints and also the same brush on this test. On the right hand side, as you can see here, Bockingford paper, I decided to paint the cliff scene on it. And on the right side, Saunders Waterford, where I paint the mountain and water scene. After I finished sketching, I apply marking fluid on both paper and also test a very true wet on wet technique by wetting both sides of the paper. I would like to see how well they handle the wet on wet technique. So right away I noticed that the cotton paper stay wet much longer, which made wet on wet techniques easier and more forgiving. In contrast, the Bockingford one. It dried quite quickly, so I had to work very fast on my sky area to avoid the hard edges, because I would like to have the fluffy cow effect. And also blending was still possible on Bockingford, but I had to assist it more actively with my brush, like help pushing the color more. When it comes to mixing color on the paper using wet on wet techniques, it's noticeable that cotton paper makes the process easier, make my life easier. I think it's much more enjoyable. The pen blends effortlessly as the paper helps compensate and support the flow. On Bockingford, it is still doable, but I needed to be more careful about it and make sure that the paper was neither too dry nor too wet. Otherwise, the paint could lift up easily or create color effect instead. When it comes to layering, both paper handle it quite well. However, again, on the cellulose paper, I had to be more careful. Too much blending could lift the previous layer. And I also accidentally dropped some black paint onto the sky area on my clip scene on Bockingford paper, which turned out to be a very good opportunity to test the lifting technique, I would say. I used a clean, damp brush to lift the paint off, then blotting it with a tissue paper. However, I just scrub it a bit too much because I don't want to be gentle. I would like to see how the paper can handle this scrubbing as well. So it shows that the paper became slightly damaged. So please be mindful. It's important to be gentle when using the technique with this Bockingford paper. I really enjoy painting on both paper in general. The cotton paper Saunders Waterford is currently my all-time favorite one. It's definitely better for wet on wet techniques and also smooth blending. However, Bockingford, I would say that it's quite enjoyable to use as well, especially for drier techniques such as painting sea waves and using lifting techniques on the cliff areas. I also really like the final look of the painting on Bockingford. Even though it's not a cotton paper, the results are satisfying, I would say, and I have no complaints. It's more about adjusting your techniques to suit with the paper as it dries faster. But overall, I find that both papers are fun to use in their own ways. So yes, this is my taste. Thanks for staying with me until the end. Have you ever tried these two papers before? What do you think about them? I would love to hear your thought about it, or if you prefer other paper more, just let me know in the comments. I really enjoy hearing from you guys. And if you are curious about the full painting process, I will upload the complete version on my Patreon, so feel free to check it out if you are interested in it. Otherwise, thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.